this week we are going to be talking about Donald Trump's plans for Gaza, and we're going to talk about how we relate to our enemies. So, update me, guys. What's the latest on Trump and Gaza as of this week?
I mean, there's so much. It's just really hard to keep up with it. People are weighing in all the time. What have you seen, Gio?
Well, I can see the past and the present, right? And why I'm saying this, it reminds me of Trail of Tears. And I keep memorizing and keep remembering that time. It was 60,000 people. Here you're talking about more than 2 million people, right? And what happened after that? You wrote stories, you try to compensate about it. You said, yo, whatever happened was bad, and whoever did that bad, Andrew Jackson was bad. Nobody remembers him good. Do you? Do you? Nobody, right? I know that's going to be a plan from Trump, or it's his trump card to make a peace negotiation. But just the thinking of it in reality, to see it becoming a reality, is so ugly reality that I want to close my eyes and say I don't want to see that, because it is ethnic cleansing right away, nothing else. Period. That's what I think.
I mean, there's certainly that on Twitter. People have echoed that sentiment, and on Instagram and all the places I've been keeping track of it. I mean, there are a lot of people who think that. There are also people who think it might be a good thing if done well.
So, the just to clarify here for anyone who's not up to speed, basically what's on the table is the idea that America takes over Gaza, that an undisclosed number of Gazans are relocated to other countries with the premise of there's going to be such a good situation, they're not even want to go back to Gaza, but they also wouldn't have the opportunity to return to Gaza either.
Right.
And then America develops that into a nice piece of land.
Mara Gaza, like
Yeah.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, and there is already support I'm seeing on Facebook on this sentiment. How can you? My question to you both, how can you support, I mean, not seeing his master plan, but just the words that coming out of his mouth, saying that displace those people, take over the land? Is that not colonial? The tag that you in America, or like in general, the West has been carrying, that colonizers, this is colonization in action for those who supported Western democracy for so long, and I'm an advocate of Western democracy. I think it balances in that principle of equality. But then these type of sentiment comes in where you think you can take over places because you're powerful and strong. I am so sorry. I'll speak about it, and I'll speak loud about it. I don't like it at all.
Tell me how you really feel.
I feel pissed. I feel sad. I feel angry. There is every set of feelings you can think of, as it's not because I can relate to Palestinians. If it was happening in Vietnam, in Cambodia, or say in Venezuela or anywhere in the world,
Mm-hmm.
I'm against this idea of removing people by force against their own choice. If all the
I don't
Gazans,
think anyone's talking about that though.
Some people are talking about that.
Maybe, but I don't think that that's like anything that has come out of like nothing I've watched on like on like the Twitter feeds and all that other stuff. Um, that would have anyone actually connected to the process has said anything about like we're just going to round everybody up and march them into the sea or something like that. Like that's I know that there are people who are always going to say those things, but like I don't think anyone credible has actually said anything like that. So I think that that's I don't think that that's the plan. I mean, I don't love the plan, but we have talked about this in other countries, right? Like we have talked about Saudi Arabia, like what happens if Egypt takes control, right? What happens if Saudi Arabia takes control? We've talked about that on this show,
yeah,
right? In the past. So, the fact that it's the United States and it's a very like boisterous person who's just kind of throwing ideas out there, inflate. And I mean, think about who's actually saying it, right? Like the person who's actually saying it is extremely unpopular with a lot of people and extremely popular with other people. So, like it's all coming out in a very polarized way, and all the interpretations of pretty much everything he's doing in the past like month has all been like he, he farted in the White House or something, and then all of a sudden, everyone's like, he's disrespecting the office, It's like,
Here's my take on this. I think America having control of Gaza is a categorically bad idea. I'm going to do whatever I can to tell everybody that I think that's a categorically bad idea. If it happens, I'm going to do my very best to be involved in the process and make sure the harm is mitigated, which I think is the way Christians should interact with this. But we're also going to buy a new studio in Gaza and record podcast episodes there.
absolutely.
So actually, what this reminds me of is actually the Assyrians in the Book of Kings.
Okay.
The Rabsakeh comes to Jerusalem on behalf of King Sennacherib II when Hezekiah is ruling Jerusalem, and they say this: "Make your peace with me and come out to me. Then each one of you will eat his own vine, each one of his own fig tree, and each one of you will drink the water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die."
Right.
That's so when I hear an American president or any leader of any country speak in the way of like, okay, we'll just give you land somewhere else, that to me rings of a imperial Babylonian Assyrian type of worldview, and not a biblical one.
Okay, I agree with you. And I just want to put it out there though that we're not talking about a normal place. We're talking about a place that has like there's been nonstop war since 1950. Like, you know what I mean? Since 1948 there's been nonstop war, and the ideologies like at work here, you cannot like you can't just I don't think you can fix it by just sending people away, but you can't discount the fact that the ideologies at work are like actually like the problem, right? So I don't think like, oh well, we'll just ship them out is the answer either. But I don't think that if you look at it, you can't just say like, oh well, it's imperial. It is imperial, but it's also not a normal situation either. Like it's people have been dying for a long time, like over and over and over again.
Yeah,
And it just keeps getting worse. It's like Hatfields and McCoys or the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, on steroids, right? Like, how do we draw blood from our neighbor? And that's, regardless of whoever's right or whatever it is, it's not a normal situation.
it is not. Yes.
Yeah. So outside of like the biblical view, my biblical view is a little different in that I would look at like if you were going to actually do it, right? Which is crazy, and I don't think it's a serious proposal. Abraham had other sons, and then he gave them land grants, and he sent them away. He sent them east. Like he sent them away from where they were. And if you were to expand the Abraham Accords with that idea, where you were going to say, okay, you know what, like everyone is compensated fairly, and has a plan, I still think it's a disaster for America to put their foot in there. I think it's a huge, huge mistake because you're just going to be dealing with those same ideologies. They're never going to go away, right? Like putting a casino there is not going to help anything.
Yeah, I think one aspect that can be promising, and I think when you mentioned that there is a turbulence going on for so long, right? And we all want to see that ends, right?
Yeah.
We all want to see that coming to a close. They've all have seen enough of that Gaza, Palestine, Israel conflict for so long since I was born that this issue is there, right? So it has to end, but it has to end in a way. United States going taking over Gaza, I'm completely okay, right? But when you talk about displacing people, when you
Yeah.
talk about removing those people who are born there, who have that land belongs to them in terms of like, okay, you live in this house for 2 generations. If someone comes and say, you know what, we are building some big complexes here and we want you to move, You're like, okay, pay me or compensate me and ask me if I'm willing to move, then I'll go.
I think that's completely reasonable,
Yeah.
right? Like, because I've been to Bethlehem and I've been to Gaza and I've been to the Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal and looked down on, where all these places are. And there's like whose fault is it? Is it Fatah? Was it Hamas? Whose fault is it that it's been the way it's been for so long? It's 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 underdeveloped, it's underutilized. The money that they're getting is going to the wrong places and to do the wrong things. And when you sit there, like I can't imagine the amount of money that has gone into, say, Bethlehem, right? And I know we're not talking about Bethlehem, but Gaza's a little bit different because it was, previously inhabited by like the a lot of let's just say like Jewish billionaires pumping money into it, and then when the pullout happened, everything changed. But when you go, the buildings in Bethlehem where people live, right, look worse than the one that my aunt has lived in since the 1950s in Turkey, in the bad part of town in Adana, where the plaster's falling off and everything's like, you know what I mean? Everything's falling off the walls and there's dust and dirt everywhere and the roads are not developed. And it's a travesty that people are, living that way,
Mhm.
particularly in the face of, I mean, billions and billions and billions of dollars over decades being pumped into it. The money's not being used right? So it's not benefiting the people. And I would look at it and be like, I mean, as an immigrant, like, and all right, I'll just use my cousin for instance. She doesn't want to go back to Turkey. She's in Germany working for the UN. It's better there. It's
Mhm.
better for her family there,
Yeah.
right?
But she's the one to decide, right?
She's the one to decide, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's like if you could sit there and you could say like plausibly, I want to give you an opportunity to resettle your life. I don't know, $200,000 American. I have no idea, right? I'm not a mathematician. I'm not going to sit there and try and like slide the numbers around, but like you have the opportunity to take your family and start a better life um, somewhere else, like
Mhm.
like a grant program. And I think the sticky part is you can't come back, right? Like that's not fair. But I think that if you get cooperation from nations that are already involved in the Abraham Accords, right, and expand that, and you say, politically speaking, like would you be willing to absorb, X amount of people? You'll be compensated, they'll be compensated, and, we'll develop something that will help them integrate into your societies, right? So they could still be Palestinian. You
So
could
my
still give them some kind of like nationality or national identity or something like that. The idea isn't to just sit there and like, I would not want to see anything like, well, we're just going to erase the idea of a Palestinian people. That's ridiculous.
Mhm.
But I think that it also sucks there, right? Like,
Yeah,
my
live there.
my take on this is that what I appreciate about what Trump is talking about is there does need to be some giant radical idea to fix everything.
right.
It's not something that simply a ceasefire does not fix the situation at this point.
No, it's just going to
You've
happen
got
again.
2 million people living in rubble at this
Mhm.
point.
Right.
I think the mindset that America and its allies should be in should be the same mindset they were in at the end of World War II. What
Mhm.
it looked like to reconstruct Germany and Japan after the Second World War.
Right.
It didn't turn them into American colonies. It
Right.
turned them into a Japan run by the Japanese for the Japanese, which had nevertheless got a handle on the culture. So I think
Right. And you have to think about also what the status of those places were. I mean, they were essentially American protectorates. They weren't property of the United States.
Mhm.
correct. It was a temporary thing in order to do that. So what you might reasonably do is, and what I think Israel should have done from the beginning, is basically build civilian areas controlled by Israel or its allies from the beginning. Move the civilians in there as you take territory in Gaza. Get the civilians, the women and the children out of Gaza. Provide ample opportunities to do that, and then treat everybody left as a combatant.
I think
Once you've cleared it, then you need to rebuild and then resettle everybody. But you can do it then on the terms with a cooperative government that agrees, yes, we'll make you your own state, but you on the condition that you're not our enemy and you're our cooperative partner.
Yeah, it's a beautiful solution, James. It's no doubt it's beautiful, but it's non-realistic. Why I'm saying it's non-realistic is that there is animosity, there is hate between Jews and Arabs, and it's not 50 years old, it's centuries old, right?
Right.
There is a lack of trust between each other,
Mhm.
right? Muslims hate Jews and blame Jews that they're not to be trusted. Whatever they do is their actions does not speak reality. And I think on the other hand, Israel have same problems with Palestinians and Muslims. So I don't know what's the future or reality or what the actions will look like, but at least I just hope and pray that this Palestinian issue or Israel Palestine issue is going to an end. Good or bad, we'll talk about it later.
Right. I mean, I think the hard part when you look at things like the Reconstruction in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally when things like that have happened, is you always look back and you say, well, we should have done that differently, right? Like, why was the Berlin Wall up for so long?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, why was it like that? Why was it allowed to be like that for so long? And if you were going to make a sticking point about these things, in the negotiation of it, like nobody likes a wall in the middle of Germany, right? Nobody likes the families being separated and
Separate.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. So if you're going to go back, it's easy to sit there and say, we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that. Um, and I think that if they did do that, any kind of solution with outside intervention in the Gaza Strip is going to produce that. Like it's going to produce that whole looking back on it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, what year did they pull out of Gaza? 2006,
2007, I think.
2007. I mean, I can look back at the entire thing and be like, I don't think the execution, maybe the idea was a good idea. The execution was horrible. Like
So we always,
nobody was happy. Like,
so we always have there's always political problems, but there's also underlying worldview things.